Monday marks the start of the second week of the Derek Chauvin murder trial. For many, the case has become a symbol of systemic racism in the U.S. justice system. The trial is also putting a spotlight on the legal concept known as qualified immunity. In the simplest terms, qualified immunity protects police officers and other government officials from liability. That protection may even apply if the conduct is illegal. Qualified immunity shields officers from civil action unless they violated clearly established law. In other words, an officer is unlikely to face a judgment unless there is a prior case with identical circumstances. And it means that a victim is unlikely to win a civil suit against an officer, even if the victim's rights were violated. Qualified immunity is a federal mandate, but many cities across the country have started reviewing their own immunity standards. And some, including New York City, are doing away with it entirely. Joining me now is New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson. We should also mention that the speaker is currently running for city comptroller. Thank you for being with us, Councilman. So let's start with the timing. New York State Attorney General Letitia James filed a lawsuit against the New York City Police Department back in January for its treatment of protesters after George Floyd's death. Was the qualified immunity vote related at all to that?
First of all, thank you, Lana, for having me on to talk about this important topic. This has been in the works for a while. Everyone remembers what happened across the country last June after George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And we have been looking at a series of bills to reimagine what policing looks like in New York City, the largest city, of course, in the United States of America. As you said, we just took a big step to end qualified immunity for cases of illegal excessive force and illegal searches and seizures. This is a big deal. No other major city in the country has done this. The only other two places are the states of Connecticut and Colorado. And we think this is a step in having greater accountability and ensuring that police officers who are violating individual civil rights are not able to have this shield where they can do whatever they want outside the bounds of accountability and transparency. So we passed this bill a week and a half ago. The mayor has said he intends to sign it. And this is a really big deal. We're proud to be a place in the country that's doing it. We hope that other places across the country, cities and states, follow us.
I want you to help clarify for our audience because, as I mentioned, qualified immunity is a federal mandate. So what exactly does the city council vote allow people to do? Can anyone now sue an officer?
Yes, you can sue an officer now if your rights have been violated, whether your civil rights have been violated, if an officer has used excessive force against you, if an officer has conducted an illegal stop or seizure against you, you now have the ability to sue the police officer and the ability to sue the police department. Let me give you a crazy example of what's going on right now. As you said just a few moments ago, the State Attorney General, Letitia James, has brought a lawsuit against the New York City Police Department for violating protesters' civil rights who were protesting last summer in the aftermath of George Floyd being murdered. Right now in New York City, the New York City Police Department and the Law Department is saying, you can't sue us because of qualified immunity. You can't sue us for violating the rights of protesters who were protesting the death of George Floyd. This can no longer be used in the future now because of the law that we passed.
Let's also ask this question because since it's a federal mandate, do you think that New York's actions will lead the federal government to limit or end qualified immunity?
It's my hope. I mean, there has been talk about this for nearly a year now. Again, after George Floyd was murdered at the federal level, House Democrats and Senate Democrats introduced a federal police package, but I'm not sure where it is and if it's going to see movement. I want to be really clear about something so that your viewers know this legal doctrine, qualified immunity, is rooted in racism, and it was made up by the federal courts in 1967 to prevent freedom riders in Mississippi from holding public officials liable when they break the law. So this was not something that was in the US Constitution. It was not in a state constitution. It was a legal doctrine created out of trying to protect police officers who were violating the civil rights of civil rights activists. 15 priests in Mississippi were mistreated by the police, and that's how qualified immunity came to be. It has a racist history, and it is time for it to be abolished by the U.S. Congress and for the president to sign that into law.
Still, there are organizations representing police officers that have been outspoken against this decision. They say that it is essential to attract and maintain a qualified police force. Let's play some of the samples of the criticism.
Every bill that they put in is making it more difficult for our detectives and the police in the street to do their job.
These laws, these bills are going to cause police to be less proactive, and the people that are going to suffer are the black and brown people of the inner city.
So what's your response to that criticism that people who are working in law enforcement are putting their own lives on the line already by being out there every day on the force, and that this further exposes them and their families potentially to civil lawsuits?
This bill only says that if a police officer violates someone's civil rights by using excessive force or violating the Fourth Amendment, which is against illegal search and seizure, then they could potentially see a lawsuit. If a police officer is doing their job appropriately, not using excessive force, not violating someone's civil rights, then they have nothing to worry about. This is about accountability. The Cato Institute, which is, a libertarian right of center organization, has called qualified immunity a moral failure. Both Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Clarence Thomas, the left and right end of the Supreme Court, have criticized it. And one of qualified immunity's most vocal critics is a Trump-appointed ultra-conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, Don Willett. This is a bipartisan issue. It's an issue that's time has come to get rid of because we know it does not help policing in any way. It undermines the trust between police and communities, and we need greater accountability. It's time to get rid of qualified immunity.
Such an important discussion. New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson, thank you.
Thank you, Lana, for having me.